All right, so let's begin. So, good day to everyone that is attending this presentation titled The Impact and Legacy of Leadership. This is a discussion on what makes a good leader. So, my name is Baran Sasi, and we'll be taking a cursory glance on the subject of leadership, exploring the dynamics and variables to consider when an individual is faced with leadership roles. So, firstly, a little bit about myself. I am a U.S. Army veteran who served as an analyst for 6.5 years. My outgoing rank was sergeant, and at one point, I was responsible for a team of 7 junior analysts. I was a regional president of the Better Opportunities for Single Soldiers program several months while I was living and serving in Germany, and I received a Bachelor of Arts for International Relations and Diplomacy, serving as well for my university student council as president for 2 years and the Secretary General of its Model United Nations program for 1 year. My experience with Magic the Gathering started in 1994. I was about 8, 9 years old back then. But I didn't start consistently organizing local events until 2016, 2019, which was during my time of study in Germany. So all of this is basically simply there to indicate that I'm someone who has both theoretical knowledge and practical experience on the subject of leadership. So does this mean that I have all the answers on the subject? Well, maybe. So one more thing. As I'm interested in ensuring my presentation is able to be paced properly, I've decided that I'm going to push through the presentation portion first, and we'll have a back and forth discussion at the end. However, if you feel like engaging with one another through the Discord chat, please feel free to do so. After I've concluded the presentation, the remaining time of the session will be open for interaction between audience and presenter. So I'll ask that if you have any questions concerning any point I'm making, please feel free to share it with each other, but also save it for the end and address it to me so that way we can engage on those. So there's also going to be about a 6-second delay between clicking, so I'm going to be trying to transition into each slide. So as with any structured discussion, we will be exploring a few topics concerning leadership. First, we'll warm ourselves up by abstracting the concept of the leader. And it's here that we're going to examine the various qualities that make a leader, or at least the various things that we think make a leader. In defining leadership, the goal is to take the discussion to the next step and actually propose what leadership is in its most essential form. Once this is done, we will move into the impact of leadership section. And this portion of the discussion focuses on the idea that leadership is action driven, and these actions will have impacts at various levels. We'll go into the legacy of leadership, which examines how the decisions leaders make can, in a sense, eventually take on a life of their own. And lastly, we will summarize the discussion with the main talking points made, allowing for the final opportunity, as mentioned before, of audience presenter. So let's get into it. Now, the idea of leadership is constantly debated throughout human history and may have subtle or radical differences between people. Whether someone is given the label of natural born leader or is tempered in years of success and failure, every leader possesses goals, and it is up to these leaders to determine how they will achieve that goal. So right now, I want you all to go ahead and think of some things that you believe are qualities of a leader, whether you think they are necessary or just good to have. Because at times, leaders may be distinguished by the manner of their physical prowess, typically the result of some martial discipline, experience in manually demanding situations, in anticipation of being in dangerous environments, this itself can command a high level of respect on its own by many who seek to follow those leading by example. Now, another quality attributed to leaders is their intelligence. This is the idea of someone whose knowledge and cleverness and their mental resilience is a resource and a source of efficient and effective decision making. Those master strategists who have been seasoned in critical thinking to the point where they're able to resolve issues before those issues become actual problems. And it's because of this quality that people follow these types of leaders, because they know each decision made is object driven. So I'm sure many people in the audience are going to have some sort of thought on the notion of social or economic capital. This idea that individuals are able to use their resources to achieve and accomplish great things. At times, this kind of person may be referred to as the who you know rather than what you know individual. And they may also be the kind of person that suggests no problem is too expensive to solve. Usually best demonstrated by the labels people give to these kinds of people. They're the anchor of the party. They're the social butterfly that knows how to make events attractive to others. They're the charismatic ringleader who is responsible for organizing and facilitating the personnel and logistics for an event or activity. In some cases, fortune of birth can result in access of these very powerful networks or coming into access of these resources. But in other instances, it's the individual knowing how to rally different people under the same goal. And it's because of this, those that tend to follow these kinds of leaders don't even realize they're a part of a bigger plan. But even if they are, they were convinced in some way that it's a good idea to support it. And lastly on this list, we'll go ahead and briefly touch on the subject of age. Because while it's a precarious one to talk about regarding leadership, it's still an interesting quality people tend to project onto leadership. Whether it's that respected elder who's given credit of having multiple generations of wisdom and experience, or it's that young firebrand who's just willing to disregard traditions and adopt new approaches. A leader's age can have a tendency of creating this aura that gives people a variety of emotions. And those, situations where someone can describe a leadership method as a generational thing. So once again, this is the abstract of leadership, and it's meant to awaken the idea of what the concept of leader can be. But what we're going to do now is go and define leadership, because a good leader will not simply allow themselves to be defined and limited by simple concept. So the funny thing about abstractions is that people tend to adopt and adapt them to their perspectives. Seems like there's some issues with hearing. I don't know if this is a server-wide problem or if it's just a few people. If I could get some feedback real quick. Okay. Then I'm sorry for those that are having technical issues. Hopefully we'll have a chance for you to get involved in the conversation soon. As I was saying, the concept of leadership is no different, as its practice can differ from culture to culture and individual to individual. And that's why defining leadership is important. There will be no confusion between people in a conversation, because sometimes you wonder if people are disagreeing on whether someone is a leader or simply whether their methods are what a leader should be doing. So what is a leader? Remember all those adjectives that we were discussing in the previous slide? Well, I want you to take them, put them on a shelf, and label them as open when in need of character development. Because, simply put, a leader is someone who has commanding authority or influence. It's this bare definition that we have to work with, using it as the foundation of what makes a good leader. And with that, we have two general questions. What is expected of a leader, meaning what should those other than a leader expect of that person in terms of their beliefs, deeds, and overall purpose? And what should be expected by them, or what do leaders feel they should expect from those they are responsible for? So, fortunately for us, these questions have been at the forefront of organizations for thousands of years. So, what we're going to do is take a look at two of what would be considered the more prominent roles where leadership is considered critical to success. We'll be starting with the business world. Now, when asking many different companies, their CEOs or high management personnel, what they think a good leader was, many of them had this concept of good sense of value. Now, I'm not exactly sure what this means to someone, as values, as I mentioned, can be abstract and subjective, and person to person, culture to culture, they could be considered different of importance. However, the general idea here is that leaders should be ethically or morally grounded, where their actions are guided by a sense of what's right. Now, it sounds very lovely, but also very easy to lose ourselves in conversation over. So, probably the most echoed statement about a good leader is this recognition of the team and the team's value. Streamlining communication, investing into professional development, identifying strengths, properly compensating for weaknesses, so on and so on. You know, these are all the little things we tell ourselves that a successful relationship with somebody should have. Well, this is what a leader should be proactive in demonstrating. So, good leadership in this situation includes knowing the general functions or stations of those who follow them. A good leader should be able to not just understand any problem that their team members bring to them, also recommend intelligent potential solutions. And this can usually take the form of engaging with other members of the team, creating council sessions to get advice and develop some sort of solution. They are also able to understand limits asserted by their team members. And I'll use an example in this case concerning the infamous boss that works in an IT firm but has no idea about IT in the slightest form. I don't know who of you in the audience might be a specialist in computer sciences, whether as a software programmer or a network engineer. But I'm sure whether in your school experience or even in the professional world, you had that run-in with the boss or the supervisor that has no idea what they're talking about. And it's because of this, they make unreasonable demands of you. And it's because of those unreasonable demands of you that their expectations are failed to be met. This creates a loss of confidence both ways between you and them. And as a result, it just creates a mess altogether. So, on the other hand, for those of you that are science fiction lovers like myself, an example of Captain Picard from the Star Trek show Next Generation, he is an example of a character in a leadership position that knows how to do the job of everyone to a degree of competence. And he's not necessarily a specialist of every person's field, but he trusts those that are his subject matter experts, whether it's Lieutenant Geordi LaForge or Lieutenant Worf or Lieutenant Commander Data. These all different specialists in their fields, he knows that he could go to them and seek their counsel, but at the very least, he also knows how to perform some sort of basic function of their responsibilities. So, uh, bottom line, the idea of team management is probably the greatest challenge because a leader's inability to properly utilize those team members can lead to big picture problems. And when we talk about big picture in the business world, we're of course talking about usually the bottom line, quarterly reports, whatever the goal of the company is. The leaders are expected to be motivated to help it make money because businesses like to grow. Sometimes they occasionally like to do nice things for the community, and the business world expects its leaders to stay focused on that bottom line to make sure that they are able to have that market share for action. Of course, as a leader, you're going to be expected to make hard choices. And this is where we get into the philosophical, emotional, and even spiritual dilemmas that plague people in their day to day decision making process. This would require probably a presentation on its own to have a real true discussion on it. But the expectation, regardless, is that a business leader is ready and capable making decisions that take on a degree of risk, whether it's to their image, whether it's to the harmony of the team, or even to the overall interest of the business itself. So these decisions can vary in weight, but the expectation is still there that no CEO made it to the top without being responsible for someone losing their job. So, a good leader in this case is one who prepares for bad outcomes and has a strategy in place. When things go wrong, of course, you expect people to come to the leader to find some sort of a solution, a path forward, and to provide it with confidence, which is really only possible to do in an honest way when a leader has put forethought into how to manage various potential crises situations. Setting clear and effective policies to handle conflicts that might come up. This is a function of a good leader as it's able to make sure that you have these systems in place for problem solving ahead of time to refer to. In regards to this, there will be a seminar that my brother will be performing in a few hours actually on the concept of premortems, which are a way to prepare for failure modes. So now that we talked about the business world, we're going to be discussing another realm where leadership is considered to be in great reverence, and this is the military world. And it's here that we will take to the doctrines provided for all service members in the U.S. Army, which is a service that I have most experience with the military. And here we'll get a general idea of what the areas of focus should be. We'll find some remarkable similarities, actually, because the first one is this subject of an individual's character. In the military, we refer to character as the qualities of being disciplined, virtuous, principled in leadership, honor, loyalty, all of these beautiful little words. They're considered necessary in pursuit to possess and demonstrate by a person in a leadership position or aspiring to be a leader. And where one has demonstrated their good of all character, this is where they're expected to then develop and inspire others, in particular those that are their subordinates. Whether it's a captain in charge of preparing a new lieutenant for their upcoming role of company commander, or whether it's a sergeant preparing the junior enlisted to accept the responsibilities of becoming a corporal. The expectation is there from the Army, from the leader of the organization, and from the subordinate that a person that's in charge of supervising will make the effort to motivate and groom others to be on the path of promotion. And as with the business leader, the military leader is therefore expected to put the mission first. And this is considered critical for each person in a unit is expected to perform their role of completing objectives towards the greater goal. And the greater goal is accomplishing the mission. This can be as simple as preparing a brigade for a parade field inspection to securing the strategic terrain in the middle of combat for future operations. And of course, both scenarios and all others may expect of the leader to make, once again, hard choices. So it should come to no surprise that the burden of command or responsibility over others in the military can lead to troubling decision points for a leader. So whether it's deciding a private first class is not ready for the responsibilities expected with the promotion to specialist, or if a company commander has decided they're going to pursue with plans for a supply convoy to a isolated outpost, despite intelligence reports of high levels of enemy activity. These are all decisions that leaders in the military are expected to make and prepare themselves to make decisions about. For a great leader is one that can balance the good of the group with the good of the individual. And it's their job to make sure that everyone in the group is where they should be at the time and that the priorities are met. So now, in the military or business worlds, of course, we have strict hierarchy. Second, I think I'm connected. All right, I think I disconnected there. Where did I leave off? All right, well, I believe I disconnected somewhere about transitioning. Okay, so I was talking about how in the business and military worlds, uh, leadership, of course, is in the form of a strict hierarchy, where leaders are kind of like middle managers who themselves are reporting to someone else, and there's very little flexibility in adapting to projects to the individual's needs. But in smaller, more organically formed groups, such as Magic the Gathering related ones, like ourselves, there can be more of an ongoing conversation between team members and their leaders to ensure that everybody wants the same thing. Everyone's able to benefit from the results, and therefore everybody is working towards achieving this goal. So now that we have a more concrete idea of leadership, it's time to contextualize it within the Magic community. We know that leaders are above all else expected to get things done, and how they do so may change due to individual style and personalities. Because it's the members of the Magic community, which are judges, content creators, players, and all other people that live in this ecosystem that have to be aware that we make an impact. And it is through the service of the community in some way that everyone plays their role in shaping events in the greater world of Magic. So, in this way, leadership in our communities are not just about identifying the best opportunities or resources or people and putting them together, but in identifying the potential that everyone in the community has, particularly newcomers, and then helping them grow. And it's this attempt to patiently nurture that we can therefore see ourselves as cultivators planting the seeds for future generations. So it's through this service of the community, which is why so many in the magic community are willing to volunteer in organizing events. So whether it's simply holding an unsanctioned event of 100% proxied commander decks, it could be facilitating a magic fest or an event of similar size near or within your hometown. It could be organizing an online conference such as this so that people around the world can network and learn from one another. Whatever, whatever form it takes, um, event organizers within the magic community who pursue these goals and accomplish them are in practice leaders, and they help keep in line and fill with vibrant growth the ecosystem of magic. And this is the big picture, the mission at large. But we know that individuals in the community, leaders specifically, are not just exclusively event organizers who sit at the top of the social hierarchy. We have judges, trainers, mentors, we have counselors, we have many people with different specialties and skill sets that are able to help serve individuals within the community. And in some way, they demonstrate their capacity for being a leader as well. And this is something that we can't avoid recognizing. We have to accept and show support of this leadership demonstration for a lot of people at this level. And we also know that through participating and performing these leadership roles within the community, we not only enrich those around us, but we also enrich ourselves. For with our accomplishments and our contributions, these lend to our own sense of belonging and purpose. So we further root ourselves, which nurtures a greater potential to continue and to give creating this positive feedback loop of accomplishment. Now, the greatest frequency of challenges anyone in leadership positions will have to face is, as previously mentioned, choices. And that comes up serving in a community plenty of times. Basically, a judgment call will have to be made at many different times, and we have to be able to guide ourselves through those different kinds of potential situations. You know, whether you are a judge or event organizer, at times you will have to be making a quick decision. Whether it's a ruling in an investigation that has begun to exhaust all possibilities, or as a tournament organizer dealing with your printer that breaks or software that crashes when pairings were supposed to be posted 5-10 minutes ago, you're going to be expected to make a quick decision when needed, and sometimes it's only you at that point of critical decision making. And then to the next level, we're talking about having to make hard choices. When, as a judge at your local LGS, let's say, your local LGS, you come across information that a player you are either friends with or are at least friendly towards are accused of cheating or stealing. What do you do then? You know, as the organizer of an event, what if a draft player becomes so overwhelmed with having to choose between a foil Tarmogoyf or a Liliana of the Veil that they decide to just stand up and leave with the pack altogether rather than pass either of them up and continue the draft? You know, these are real everyday questions that could be faced by people in these positions. And the answers to these questions might seem obvious, but there will be situations a leader will be confronted with that call for one kind of decision, but lead to unintended consequences that could create a chain of events. So the important thing about this concept is that as a leader, as a good leader, it's important to know that you will not always make the right choice. And how you self reflect and self correct in moments after such incidents taking place is critical to maintaining leadership integrity for the future. So, essentially, good leaders will try to establish clear policies in place to help facilitate these smoother interactions, decision making processes, and reinforce the sense of fairness or justice in the event of incident. So, because the future of magic is what all of us are basically here for and thinking about, at least should be thinking about, the types of leaders in the magic community that are nurtured and embracing will help create defining moments in its history. And in the event of the subject of legacy, we're talking about how actions and decisions result in achievement. As each magic event is completed, as each decision leads to positive result, these become a new standard for how things can be done in the future. Learning how to problem solve a software or hardware failure issue during a tournament, finding an effective solution with how to resolve community-related issues concerning inclusivity. These will be talking points and advice that people in the community will be sharing with one another, leading to others being capable of implementing methods when faced with these similar circumstances themselves. Likewise, failure will be providing opportunities to learn from. When in a community networked as closely together as the Magic, the Gathering one is, one's mistake can be a valuable opportunity to learn from others. So underestimating the number of participants to provide product for, overlooking the possibility that special needs players may participate in an event, these are just a few examples of oversight that can be used to empathize, or rather emphasize to somebody else in the future. Say, hey, these were things that I didn't consider when I was responsible for an event. Try to consider them yourself. And therefore, leaders in the Magic community should be self-aware enough to identify the difference between confidence and, arrogance. Because arrogance and the potentially damaging decisions made through it will eventually lead to compounding problems and leading to few solutions. Whereas confidence will allow one to properly assess their own decisions as reasonable while considering any feedback someone might give them and take it into consideration. So here's going to be probably the most important part of this presentation on leadership concerning current events and how we plan to move forward as a community. Because we know that we are in some uncertain times for many people in particular. Some individuals are being more impacted by it than others, and we have to know and be very conscious about our actions and decisions moving forward. Whether it is the controversy concerning the new secret lair, the controversy concerning the state of constructed or pro or organized play, the pandemic itself making it impossible for many people to experience the social interactions and connection Magic has always allowed them to, or other events in the world or in a person's individual life. We have to accept that leaders, the Magic community, have the responsibility of shaping the future. And now more than ever, we know that people in the community are going to be looking to those in leadership position to show them that things are going to be okay. As leaders, you may not know the answers to the questions people ask because uncertainty is something that we all share, but passion for the game and the community are things we grow and reinforce together. Therefore, if you see someone who seems despondent or fatalistic about the situation they're in, you may be in a position to help them find or share a more positive experience when it comes to the community. And that's supposed to be something a leader is very acute at sensing, is these moments around them. And in realizing this, a leader will know that when the time comes to step out or step down, there will be others to replace them. Those others will undoubtedly have been groomed and nurtured to have beliefs and make decisions based on the environment they developed within. In our case, it's the magic community. A leader's lasting impact as a decision maker must be conscious of both what they've learned, but also what they are teaching the next generation. So a leader must be ready for the truth that their decisions will leave a lasting ripple within the greater community that can change the course of its future. Making a decision that seems sensible or even justified in our current atmosphere can shift the paradigm on how magic not only as a game is played, but as a lifestyle is experienced for others. So, in summary, the biggest takeaways we should have from this presentation is that, simply put, a leader will have many expectations from others and of themselves. They must be insightful enough to identify what needs to be done. It could be a community building initiative or a mentorship program. But a leader must also be resourceful enough to know how to get those things done, such as through the networking of individuals specialized and experienced in certain fields or disciplines. Or it could be knowing how to properly manage and delegate objectives to different individuals. But at the end of the day, we know that a leader is basically someone who gets things done. And while the methods may vary, the responsibility may be more or less stressful, but ultimately the goal will be met. And the only thing that stops people from taking on a leadership role tends to be this lack of confidence. If you have a goal or something you wish to see in the world, be confident that other people may actually want the same thing, and be bold enough to try and make it a reality, as leaders often are simply those demonstrating initiative that others will then be inspired by. So this being said, this concludes the presentation portion of this session. I hope for those of you that have been listening throughout it, there were few interruptions, technical issues, but I also hope that it kind of gave you all an opportunity to think and kind of perceive things in a different light given your situations, given the state of magic, given the state of your place in the magic community, and maybe inspire you to be a little more proactive in trying to support and help how you can when it can be done. So I'd like to, at this time, open up the chat to asking any questions, engaging in some sort of feedback with one another, myself included. If anyone has any questions towards me, maybe regarding some personal experience, I'd be more than happy to address it. Also, I would like to open myself up to people in the future if they feel like I'm somebody that they'd like to discuss different things with concerning the subject of leadership. All right, can everybody hear me now? Ah, okay, great. So what was the last thing that anyone was able to hear? End of the presentation? That I was going to take questions? Okay, well, all right. Okay, so I attempted to address one of the audience members' questions, it was a statement that they made in the course of the presentation. I believe Facundo, is that how you pronounce your name? All right. Good. I'm glad I got it right on the first try. So you mentioned at some point in the session that you don't think it's necessary for technical knowledge to be possessed in order to be a good leader, but rather you should know how people should be managed. So yes and no. I do agree that a good leader, they should be very good at managing and delegating responsibilities to members of the team. However, let's go back to the concept of, say, being a IT professional. Whether you have in private sector or the military sector, um, if you're a member of a team and your supervisor or manager is that person that kind of doesn't know what they're talking about, maybe you've been in that situation. Um, then you'll be able to instantly relate to this idea that um, instead of being able to help the situations, if there's any sort of problems, they actually are kind of frustrating them more and more. Uh, so let's say you're a software programmer and your manager doesn't have any real understanding of the language the product or project is supposed to be writing with. So what happens if you're sick and you're the only person that was able to software right now? So that creates a single point of failure, right? So your manager or supervisor is basically inactive for the duration of your time being away from the project. That creates a problem now in realizing the project deadline. Or again, say they don't understand um, that certain things are just not realistic expectations of a project. Again, this makes it harder to communicate with this person. They know how to manage the members of the team, but because they can't carry their weight when necessary, it creates more issues than it does solution. So I hope that kind of gives a little perspective, if that makes sense. Um, so I'll go ahead and look for another question. See, we have Charles asking about whether I can offer some examples of how leaders can mentor in the face of not running events, because it was mentioned a few times about mentorship, and I think it's an important aspect of the judge program. So mentorship is a subject. It's a very important one. I've been to many different lectures and seminars concerning mentorship. My time in the military, mentorship was considered a very important responsibility. However, in the military, mentorship was kind of um, an expectation of people, especially in leadership position. You're expected to mentor and nurture and develop and be kind of like the person that could be depended on when an individual in your team has questions or concerns. Now, in terms of the magic community, but mentorship more in general, I think one of the first important things is to kind of um, make yourself available. And when I say make yourself available, I don't mean, you're kind of like putting post-it notes in front of the refrigerator for everybody in the shared apartment to see, hey, mentorship sessions, call this number every day at 3. But more when you engage with someone, when you're having a conversation with someone, and you could kind of tell through that conversation that maybe this is somebody that uh, could use a little structure, maybe a point of contact, somebody that they could approach in the future if they have a question concerning magic as a casual experience, if they have questions concerning magic as a more structured experience, as a judge organizing events, whether it's concerning the idea of practicing the new rules and mechanics that come with the next set, with Zendikar Rising, for example, or even when the Mutate mechanic was released back in Ikoria, and people were just very curious about how this mechanic works. This is how you can kind of uh, create a hook to somebody, and through time, through engaging in conversation, through having these back and forths, through teaching different things, this bond, this mentorship relationship kind of slowly develops. Um, does this kind of seem like a practical way of approaching the concept of um, mentorship? Okay. Yeah, I mean it's very tough right now, but at the same time, we know that thanks to technology and social media, our ability to stay connected with one another during an incredibly unprecedented time and situation that we're in right now, uh, it makes it easier. For a lot of us, not being able to engage with our friend groups in person at the local game store every Friday or Saturday or Wednesday or whatever it was, it makes it hard to meet new people, uh, be able to reinforce your role in the community as somebody that's a rules guru or the go-to person for organizing events, the person to offer some sort of wisdom or advice about how things, you know, should be perceived and looked at with regards to deck building or what have you. But, you know, moments like this, these kinds of online seminars, these online communication platforms, these are ways for us to meet new people and be able to start those conversations, get the ball rolling. And hopefully, at some point, you will realize that you became a positive influence in somebody's life with the feedback that you give. It is. It is a hard conversation to have at times. So, a question: how to lead by example if the place doesn't want you to? I've experienced tournament organizers that didn't want to have a judge around. So, so this is kind of like in my opinion, a conflict of interest situation. I'm not sure, Crash, if like what the specific reason a tournament organizer wouldn't want to have a judge around would be. Maybe you could clarify that. Several. So in that case, it was an event on a regular day, and they made clear that they didn't want to pay any judges and wanted to do everything by their own. Okay, so I think I'm going to see this from the perspective of the business where they feel like they can do everything internally, and they don't want to have to give away promotion packs or prize support or some sort of compensation to a judge. Um, for events that they're organizing. So in this case, actually, I can kind of give a similar, or not a similar example, but something on the same note. So I made myself available to the key local game store chain in my state. I live in Florida, and that would be a chain that has locations in different major cities throughout Florida. Um, Now, because of the current situation, they decided they were not going to have local events for the foreseeable future. However, they knew that I made myself available to them in the event of being able to organize online events, digital events, uh, using Discord or other online platforms to facilitate draft events, structured events, things like that. And they said, thank you, we'll take your offer into consideration, and we'll let you know if it ever comes down to it. So basically, they either didn't want me in particular to be a part of the team process, or they just didn't decide it was something necessary to be done. Now, that being said, did that stop my decision to be involved in some way in the community? Because, as you can see, I'm a presenter now. So the answer to that question, in short, is no, it didn't stop me from demonstrating to myself that I have the chance and opportunities to still lead. So one closed door leads to you just having to look in another direction for an opening somewhere else. So let's say, for example, with the TO that you're referring to, if that was an LGS that you go to frequently, the TO expresses, hey, we're not interested in having a judge around, we'll do everything internally. Now, is that going to say stop you as, say, being a judge, a certified judge, from being able to organize your own events, even if it's not official? You don't have to necessarily create and organize sanctioned events. You can create unsanctioned casual events. I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation that while I was in Germany studying, I was also an event organizer for the Magic community in the city that I was living in for 3 years, 2016 to 2019. And while the local game stores, we had two in the city, it was Heidelberg, Germany. While the local game stores had their own events on Wednesdays or Fridays or Saturdays, we would decide to have our own events on the off days of the week. So, like, say Sunday, say Monday, say Thursday. And these were unsanctioned events, but they were still opportunities for people in the community, if they had the time, to participate, whether it's a draft, whether it's a modern event, a standard event, two-headed giant, all proxy, casual, commander events. I was trying to make sure that these events could happen as often as possible. And as I was doing this, I realized that more and more people were coming to me and saying, hey, so when's the next modern event? Hey, can we think about doing Pioneer? There's this new format that Wizards is trying to support. Can we have a Pioneer event when it comes live? Can we do something concerning maybe Vintage with proxies? Can we do something experimental like with Pauper? And I realized that I had kind of adopted this responsibility of being a community event organizer, a pillar. So let's finish with this as the last basically talking point. I hope that story that I just shared kind of gives you a little bit of hope that one closed opportunity shouldn't demotivate you from still trying to find future options and opportunities to make some sort of impact. All right, once again, I want to thank everybody for their patience. I want to thank everyone for their attention. I appreciate the questions and any feedback that you will provide. Once again, if you'd like to engage me outside of this session, please feel free to send me a direct message on Discord, or you could try to find me through some sort of social media application in the future. Best of luck and best wishes, and stay safe, everyone.